Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's third webinar in the series called Montana's Native People Perspectives on the Clovis Child, hosted by the Yellowstone Gateway Museum. My name is Diane Chalfant, and I'm a volunteer and board member of the Yellowstone Gateway Museum here in Livingston, Montana. The Clovis Child refers to the 12,600-year-old Clovis Anzick site in Park County, Montana, the oldest known burial site in North America. Since it was first discovered in the 1960s, the site and the remains of the child buried there have been the focus of both cultural and scientific study. This series is career-oriented and it's directed toward college and high school students, particularly tribal college students, considering careers in the fields related to our speakers' work. We've asked our speakers to talk about their work, their various perspectives on the Clovis Child, and their personal journeys toward their professions. In a moment, I'll introduce the museum's interim director, Karen Reinhardt, but first I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items so that you'll know how to participate in today's event. At any time during the webinar, you'll have the opportunity to submit your questions to today's presenters, Dr. Sarah Anzick and Professor Skye Gilham. Your questions will be anonymous. To submit a question, just type your question into the Q&A tab at the bottom of the control panel. We are pleased that Dr. Shane Doyle, our first speaker in the series, has returned to assist us today. Shane will read the questions and will share them with our speakers. Professor Gilham and Dr. Anzick will answer as many of the questions as they can during a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. We have many participants today, and we want to be sure that we can track and answer any questions that you may have. So again, if you have questions, please use that Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. We will be recording the webinar, and we'll upload it to Yellowstone Gateway Museum's YouTube channel after the event. And finally, following the webinar, you'll have an opportunity to take a very short survey. We'll use the survey results to help us to continue to improve the webinar series, so we hope you'll take advantage of that. I'd now like to introduce Yellowstone Gateway Museum's interim director, Karen Reinhardt. Karen?
Thank you, Diane, for the introduction and for all of your hard work on this project. We'd also like to thank Humanities Montana for funding the webinar series and Montana Office of Public Instruction for additional support. And I hope that you, our viewers, will register for the remaining webinar programs, which are held every Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. through December 1. Next week, join us for From Siberia to the Americas and Beyond, Becoming an Evolutionary Geneticist with Eska Willerslev. And now, our speaker introductions. Professor Skye Gilham, Educator and Cultural Liaison, and Dr. Sarah Anzick, Molecular Biologist. Enjoy the presentation.
Well, thank you so much, Karen and Diane and Shane and other organizers of this really exciting webinar series. I think this is a super important event that you're putting together, and thanks also for the funding opportunities to have this happen. So I thought I'd start by giving a little background about myself. I was born in Livingston, Montana, in a small town on the Yellowstone River, which is nestled between the Absaroka and Crazy Mountain ranges. And I've got a picture of the sleeping giant here, actually, that you can see from the town that's in the Absarokas. I graduated from Park High School in 1984. And my father was a longtime large and small animal veterinarian, and he was really my inspiration to pursue a field in the medical sciences. And so I went to Carroll College in a pre-medical program to pursue a bachelor's degree, and that was from 1984 to 1988. I had aspirations of becoming a medical doctor, but you'll see a little bit later that I did take a different path. So Skye, kind of curious about your background.
Hi, and thanks to everyone too. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, I was born in Browning, Montana, and grew up on the Blackfeet Indian Reservation. And I graduated from high school in 2000. During that time, I kind of realized as a Native American that it was really important that I go to school. And it was kind of a key to a better life and to helping my people. So I left to university in Montana. And just really quickly, I included some pictures of home. There's the entrance to the Blackfeet Indian Reservation and the statue that is at every entrance, which is pretty cool. And there's a picture behind my house, which is pretty cool. So anyway, I kind of knew education was the key, and it was there that I found this passion for criminology and then later forensic anthropology, which has been more of my focus in life. And during that time, I was selected to the McNair Scholars Program, and I completed a study on Blackfeet and the prevalence to diabetes with a diet and genetics perspective. And this was coincidentally at the same time Sarah completed work on the Human Genome Project. And that actually opened up a whole new world of genetic research. It mapped our own genetic code. And so it was kind of cool that we had been working on projects that were kind of similar, cutting edge. So my work on that project actually began a lifelong fascination with genetics, DNA, and research.
It's really cool. Actually, when Skye and I met to try to create this little conversation, I realized that I was actually at the Blackfeet Nation, went to visit the high school back in 2003. I was a DNA Day ambassador and went to talk to the students there to try to inspire them about all the cool things about DNA. So our paths probably crossed even before Anzick Child story.
Yeah, and I totally didn't even know that until we got together for this. We had met years ago, so that was pretty cool. And we, you know, if she didn't meet me, she probably met some of my family for sure.
Yeah.
So I guess the next thing, Sarah, let's share with everyone what we do for our jobs. And I know you do something really amazing. So maybe tell us what you do and what you love about your job.
Sure. So I work at Rocky Mountain Labs, which is located in the Bitterroot Valley in Hamilton, Montana. That's just south of Missoula. And RML is actually a part of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, which is one of 27 institutes and centers that make up the National Institutes of Health. And RML was actually opened up to study the cause of the Rocky Mountain spotted fever that's caused by the bite of ticks such as this that carry a nasty bacteria called rickettsia. I really love my job because we do research on so many different things that have an impact on human life, on human health actually. So I work in the genomics core facility where we collaborate with different investigators on a variety of projects. And we work on genomes, that's life's instruction book, of viruses, bacteria, parasites, as well as study immunological disorders in humans. So I've had the privilege really to help on studies of Zika virus, Ebola virus, malaria, and even SARS-CoV-2, which is the virus that causes COVID-19 that we're all experiencing today. One of my more challenging projects was deciphering one chromosome. It was a chromosome 11. That became rearranged in a patient with Jacobson syndrome, which is a rare chromosomal disorder characterized by a range of developmental delays. And so really my job is really super cool because it's allowed me to develop a set of skills in a variety of disciplines such as cell biology, microscopy, molecular biology, which is actually my specialty, and even more lately computational science, which I've really enjoyed. So Skye, I'm ready to hear about yours. Uh-oh. I don't hear Skye.
You know what? I think my internet is acting up a little bit, but
Okay,
I think it's okay now. So when I came home from U of M in 2005, I immediately began teaching at the Blackfeet Community College, which is our tribal college. And I've been an instructor there for 15 years now, which is hard to believe. And I've taught in that time all kinds of different subjects. Right now, I pretty much specialize in forensic science and sociology. So I have found during all that time that I really love working in education because it inspires others to follow in our path, which has been really rewarding to see that happen. And I've included a picture of the building I teach at BCC. It's the Math and Science building, and it's actually really state of the art. So I actually work in there, so that's pretty cool. And also recently I started work on a missing and murdered Indigenous persons grant for the state of Montana. And it's all in conjunction with BCC. So I also work at the tribal college for that. And it's really interesting and essential work. If you haven't heard, it's been kind of in the news. And it's been an ongoing issue, so I'm glad to bring some light to that. So the pic on the right is our reporting portal and website, which is debuting this weekend, coincidentally. And really lastly, I also am appointed to the Montana State Burial Preservation Board, and I've been on there for almost 10 years now, and I'm their physical anthropologist. And this is actually how I met Sarah, Shane, and some other people that are involved in this webinar. And I'll tell you more on that later too, but the picture on the bottom is our most recent board picture. So what I love about my work is I do all kinds of different stuff, but it's all meaningful and much needed. And each one is important, from respectfully reburying and repatriating our ancestors to helping with modern day missing or murdered Indigenous cases. And like I said, it's all really significant. So since the reason we're here, Sarah, what is your connection to the Anzick and Clovis Child?
Yeah, well, thanks. I have both personal and professional connections to the Anzick Child, and it spans really over 4 decades, beginning in 1968 with the accidental discovery of the burial site. And this is a picture of the land. So this was my family playground over the decades, where we would go and picnic and fish. In fact, this is where I caught my first fish. This sign here indicates the location of the burial. And so this is home to the Clovis Child. I was only 2 years old when the site was accidentally discovered, which incidentally is around the same age estimated to be for the Clovis Child. And so I almost had kind of a little personal connection there as well. Just a little background on the site. As I mentioned, it was accidentally discovered by 2 construction workers who recovered over 100 stone and non-human bone artifacts, and they were all covered in red ochre, which is an iron hematite substance used in burial ceremonies. And these tools were actually buried with the Clovis boy. And because of the nature of the way that these artifacts or these stone tools looked, they were recognized as belonging to the prehistoric Clovis culture. In fact, they were carbon dated to the prehistoric Clovis culture as well.
So Sarah, for those of us that might not know, that are out there, can you tell everyone a little bit about who Clovis are and what it is?
Yeah, it's really pretty fascinating. So the Clovis is really the name that's given to big game hunter culture who occupied North America during the end of the last ice age. So this is when megafauna, that is the large mammoths, saber-toothed tigers, and giant sloths for roaming about. And their name is actually derived from these characteristic spear points that were originally identified in Clovis, New Mexico in 1933. And I just want to mention that these the artifacts from the Anzick site are actually at the Montana Historical Society. So I'd like to encourage the community to go and check them out. And I'm sure we'll hear from Amanda in the next few seminars about that as well, or webinars. But for decades, the most popular theory, and one of which probably a lot of us read about in the textbooks, was that the prehistoric Clovis people were the first people to populate North America, and this was called the Clovis first theory. But by the mid-1970s, the Clovis first theory was beginning to get challenged because there were other archaeological sites that were found that showed evidence of human occupying even longer than Clovis, 14 to 15,000 years ago, such as the site in Monteverde in Chile. And in fact, more recently, just this past July, work at a cave in Mexico demonstrates that there's evidence of people being here even as long as 30,000 years ago.
So kind of along the lines of that, many Native oral traditions and creation stories, including my own Blackfeet one, has said that our origin has always been here. So what about the theory that the first peoples in North America were European, and where did that come from?
Yeah, so there was a theory suggesting that the first people to populate the Americas were here long before Clovis, and they were actually Ice Age Europeans who paddled in kayaks across the Atlantic. And this was named the Solutrean theory because the Clovis technology, as you see here, closely resembles the Solutrean culture from France and Spain. Well, the whole genome sequencing of the Anzick boy was super important because it demonstrated that this child is directly ancestral to Native Americans and refuted that theory that Europeans were the first to settle in the Americas.
And I think that's really monumental that Clovis Child proved otherwise, especially for Native people and for me, because I always felt like that part was wrong when I read it in textbooks in college. So it was kind of like, oh, it's so awesome we can throw out that because we always said that we were here. So that's what I always thought was so amazing about this discovery. So what is known about the archaeological record of Clovis, Sarah?
Yeah, as shown here, Clovis appears to have originated south of the ice sheets that covered Canada. So no Clovis has been found in Siberia or Alaska, and no Clovis has been found in South America. And so it seems to be truly unique to North America. Interestingly, there are two different complexes that radiocarbon date with Clovis, but they lack the diagnostic Clovis tools and technologies. And they've been found in Western United States, called Western Stem Tradition, as indicated here with the hatch marks, and also south of Panama, called Fishtail. But what's really interesting is if we look at 10 Clovis sites that have been radiocarbon dated with precision, and this has been reported by Waters et al., he suggests that the Clovis culture was actually really quite short-lived. They're suggesting even 300 years is all. So it seems that these people essentially appeared out of nowhere and disappeared along with the mass extinction of the megafauna at the same time. And so I would just want to point out that Anzick is truly unique because Anzick is the only known Clovis site which contained human remains.
Right, so I kind of got to ask, you're not an anthropologist or archaeologist. How did you get involved and how do you know so much about this, Sarah?
Yeah, so while working, I went down to work at the Los Alamos National Labs in Los Alamos, New Mexico, and I had the privilege to assist in the early days of the human genome physical mapping efforts. As we hopefully all know, the Human Genome Project was a huge international effort to read the genetic code, that is the code of life, and that is to sequence all of our nucleotides, the A, C's, G's, and T's. That's our alphabet, life's alphabetical soup that's contained on the 23 pairs of chromosomes that really give us our instructions for human life. And so in the early 1990s, when I assisted on the project, we didn't necessarily read the DNA at that point, but really we were involved in more of creating a physical map of it. And what that meant is that we would separate the chromosomes. We were focused on chromosomes 16 and 21, and they could be separated from a process called flow sorting. We'd break those chromosomes into different pieces, package them into smaller workable fragments, and then map them back onto the chromosome. And so it was kind of like putting a puzzle together. And this is just a diagram of chromosome 16, and this lighter fragment you see here is one of those smaller pieces that's broken up, and then we can get a physical location of it. And this actually yielded one of my very first publications a long time ago in 1994. And I just want to mention, for purposes of a little bit later in the talk, is that these sequencing efforts back then took thousands of these instruments that you see here in a lot of different buildings. And of course, this was an international effort. 200 principal investigators I read somewhere, and hundreds of technicians to make this happen. Well, in 1994, I moved to the National Human Genome Research Institute, which again, another institute, the National Institutes of Health, where I pursued a career in cancer genetics and went on to earn my PhD in molecular and cellular oncology from George Washington University. Well, in 2000, the announcement of the completion of a draft human genome sequence came out, and this is really when I began to make that connection between what we can learn from life's book of instruction, this human genome, and the ancient Clovis individual. I wondered if we could potentially sequence an ancient genome, and none had been done at this time when I began thinking about this.
So in the past, ancient DNA has been very challenging work, which is kind of what you're alluding to. Can you explain to us how technology progressed from taking 10 years for everyone to sequence one human genome to actually being able to sequence an entire ancient individual, such as the Anzick child, in a
Yeah, great.
amount of time?
Great question. So because of the experience gained in this first human genome sequencing efforts, there are major technological advances that really advance the field of ancient genomics, where it's gone from characterization of really short fragments of DNA to whole genome sequencing. And the main driver of the advancement in the field is a process or a technology called next generation sequencing, often called NGS. And this happened at around 2005. And what this meant is we could sequence genomes much quicker and a lot cheaper. In fact, to complete the original sequence, whole genome sequence that took around 10, 11 years, it cost, I've read different places, it sounds like it cost around $3 billion. And today, because of this advancement in the technology, we can actually sequence a whole genome for about $1,000. And so there have really been significant advances. So with the development of these high throughput sequencing, as I mentioned, the human genome can now be sequenced on a single instrument. And this is what I use every day in my work. I did list some other genome sizes here just for fun. Bacteria sizes, they're a lot smaller. That's, again, those are your alphabetical soup that makes up life's instruction book, the ACs, Gs, and Ts. And so really, along with next generation sequencing came to improve molecular technologies for ancient DNA specimens, meaning that it became easier to retrieve and work with ancient DNA. In addition to that, there were development of computational tools to where we could analyze ancient DNA a little bit better as well. And all of these made ancient DNA sequencing more successful. And so with all of these advances, I was actually contacted by Dr. Mike Waters out of Texas A&M, and he put me in connection with Dr. Eske Willerslev, who was the world leader in ancient genomics. And so I traveled to Eske's lab in Denmark to perform the first DNA extraction for mitochondrial DNA sequencing on the Anzick child, in an attempt to learn more about who was this Clovis individual. So Skye, I think I've covered my professional as well as personal connection with the Clovis child. I'm hoping maybe you can give us some insight as to what connects you to the Clovis child as well.
Yeah, so first of all, and foremost, my connection to the Clovis child is the child is actually our ancestor. So any Native American, it's our ancestor. So the genome sequencing revealed that the child is more closely related to all Indigenous American populations than to any other group. So this was really important to me. And I also included some pictures of my ancestors. That's my great-grandma Daisy and our original homestead, which is at the entrance of Glacier National Park. So initially my thoughts on the DNA analysis of the Clovis child were mixed. And that's because I'm both Native American and a scientist. So the way I like to say it is I feel like I live in two different worlds, and making them coexist sometimes is difficult. So once I had met Sarah and heard her story that she had wanted input and to do from the tribes and to do what was respectful, I had a realization, and I did speak of this: if it hadn't been for the genetics and the DNA, we would have no proof that the child was our ancestor, that we have been here since the beginning, like our creation stories have told, and that we can now respectfully rebury our ancestor, which she graciously allowed us to do. So prior to this and other ancient genome sequencing like Kennewick Man, we really had no backing or voice in what happened, and this really changed that and history for us as Native people. So now I really try to educate others on possible benefits of DNA testing, and especially in relation to repatriation efforts. And we've seen that especially play out with Kennewick Man, and also possible benefits for research. And I've also worked with the University of Copenhagen and Eske Willerslev, but he's up next week, so I won't talk about his work too much. I should probably talk a little bit about my board work. as this is kind of how I met Sarah and others involved in the webinar series. So this is my board slide I included. It's some of the work that I've done or helped with the Montana State Burial Preservation Board. And I was appointed in 2011 as their physical anthropologist. So I've served for almost 10 years now, and for a couple different governors, which is pretty cool. So I most recently became the vice chair of the board, and I'm still the vice chair. And I feel like I have a really unique perspective on the board because I'm a Native American and I'm also a scientist. So I think it's been very beneficial in some of the cases that come before us. And my experiences on the board have been really meaningful. So I, as a physical anthropologist, am mainly involved in the analysis of human remains and artifacts. And they come before the board for many different reasons, which I'll talk about in just a second. But we eventually repatriate or rebury them in order to correct the disturbance. So like I said, many of the remains come before the board, just like the Clovis Child kind of happened. They were unearthed by construction projects, farmers farming, things like that. So it really is important work, and it's also how I met Sarah and Shane, which you'll hear from him later. And she actually came before the board to ask for our input on the reburial of the Clovis Child and invited us to attend. And she really had no reason to be there because this predated, the data discovery wasn't included in our board legalities, but she did. And to me, it was really respectful that she wanted our input on Clovis Child. So really quickly, the next slide is about what is the board and why it's needed. And I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but basically the board was created in 1991 following NAGPRA, and its purpose is to protect skeletal remains, human skeletal remains, burial sites, burial materials, and all of this has to be found on state and private lands because NAGPRA pretty much covers the other part. And it's all from disturbance or destruction. And we also, like I said, resolve claims for repatriation of remains and funerary objects. So the need for the board is, and I'll put it in a much simpler terms, that Native American burials, like the Clovis Child, aren't grouped in a designated location. We don't have cemeteries usually, and we also don't reside on a lot of our ancestral lands anymore. So within this notion is our First Amendment right to the exercise of religion. And how that plays in is that many Native Americans believe that disinterment stops the spiritual journey. And so reburial enables the disturbed to actually resume their journey. So that's why reburial is so important. And this is really why I wanted to mention all of this in relation to the Clovis Child and the significance of the reburial, which we'll actually talk about in a few minutes. So the next slide kind of tells you who's all on the board. And I'm there in orange, I'm the little orange person, as the physical anthropologist. And there's a SHPO representative, and she'll actually be talking, I think, in a couple of weeks. It's state archaeologist Jessica Bush, and she'll be doing a webinar, so be sure you check that out. And there's also representatives from each tribe and a few other representative positions that I think a few are open, so hopefully we get those filled soon. And just a quick mention, we do work closely with U of M and other universities, museums, and the State Crime Lab. So on the next slide is some pictures of all the tribes in Montana that are represented on the board. There's Fort Belknap, Blackfeet, Flathead, Crow, Northern Cheyenne, Fort Peck, Little Shell's on there too, and Rocky Boy. And I always think these pictures are so cool and beautiful, but there's a reason that there's all these tribes represented on the board. They're actually nominated by their respective tribes and appointed by the governor. Every tribe has a different belief and tradition, so having someone on the board with that valuable input is very, very much needed. So they're usually the TIPO director or another cultural person, and on this slide, I'll actually show you why this is important. So on this slide, it shows our modern day reservations in Montana, and there's mine up in the corner, the Blackfeet. So the reason behind having all the tribal reps is that each one of us called Montana home, and we have for a very long time. And so on the next slide is our traditional areas. And you can see why this is important and why we need knowledgeable tribal reps on the board. to give input when disturbances occur. And I just kind of made up an example. It's not a real one, but for example, if we have remains that come before the board that are dated pre-contact and they were located in Hellgate Canyon, we would need someone to know who occupied that area during those times and what the proper tribe to repatriate to and the proper reburial customs. So this is why it's very important for all of us on the board. So notice the general area in the black little circle is where Clovis Child was found. And they were buried more than 12,000 years ago, which obviously predates this map. But I just wanted to point out how interesting it is that this area has always been a shared area. Many tribes had used it for hunting, things like that. So it's kind of cool. I found that interesting. And it also goes back to the fact that Sarah and others had sought input from all the tribes in Montana, and this is why.
Awesome. Skye, thank you so much, and really great review of the burial board and the important role that they have. I really enjoyed interacting with members of the board when I did attend those meetings, and thank you for all of your help through that. I really appreciate it. So I wonder if we could just go ahead and move on to the reburial of the Clovis Child, and I'm hoping, Skye, that you can kind of share some of your thoughts on the reburial and the experience.
Yeah, definitely. So the reburial, to me, it was really respectful and a very fitting ceremony for a child that had given us so much knowledge. It was really unprecedented too, to have so many people, so many of us working together, not native and non-native scientists and our own spiritual people. And it was all in order to provide this beautiful ceremony and resting place, which was in the original intended place, which was amazing too. So we don't really talk a lot about our ceremonies, but I have to share my most vivid memory of it. It's when it began, it was cold and pouring rain. We were all looking for blankets and umbrellas. It was super cold. And as it progressed, the clouds slowly started to part. And then at the end of the ceremony, the sun came out and an eagle flew by, and the day ended up being super beautiful. And to me, and that's a picture I actually had taken on our way to the feed, and it just showed how beautiful the sun came out and showed on us. And to me, that was a sign that everything was made right and that the correct path had been taken to put Clovis Child back into where he was intended. So that pic really means a lot to me, and so did the whole ceremony. It's something I will never forget. So what are your thoughts on the reburial, Sarah? It had been such a huge part of your life, so I'm wondering how that kind of went.
Yeah, for me, the burial meant closure, and it really meant, as Shane often said, this child's given us a great gift, and now it's time to return him to the final resting place. And so it was super important to have this process done, and I was really thankful to my family, to all the people who participated in this event, and Stocky and Lily White, their efforts, as well as my family, to help create the grave site, and to all of the tribal members that traveled from very far distances to become a part of this whole ceremonial event. We, I think, even had tribal members come from Arizona and Washington, and they honored me with this beautiful Pendleton blanket, as well as some beautiful, really just highly intricate and detailed beaded earrings and a necklace. And it was just such a magical, very special moment that was probably one of the most influential moments I've ever had in my life. So, and I just can't thank everyone enough. And Shane, particularly too, you were instrumental in guiding us through this whole process. And so it still comes to my heart when I talk about these things. So thank you, everyone.
I just have to say, Sarah, so the bottom picture is at a feed that you and your family did. And so I just wanted to put out there that Sarah did take the traditional route, and she fed us after the ceremony. So we were really happy for that after getting rained on. And it was an amazing time being able to meet all these different tribal members and the people that it meant so much to, including Sarah again. And Shane. And Shane.
So I think we can maybe kind of start talking about the future generation. I'll let you, Skye.
Yeah, so, because of this case, there's a couple different hopes for the future that I have that I wanted to mention really quickly, and they're all really important. So the first was that the Clovis Child case was really amazing how we all worked together. And to me, it was a case that should set a precedent for future similar cases, ancient cases like this. What I mean by that, it's how Native beliefs and science can coexist and work together. And it's kind of that struggle I've always had inside. So it actually made me feel pretty good to be part of it. And I also think we need to collaborate, find a middle ground, and compromise, especially for the future of our people. And with that said, I also think we do need more research, especially on genetics, and to better answer why Native people struggle with things that we have. And this is especially apparent during COVID-19 times, the high rates of diabetes and heart issues and things like that. We need answers for that. And I think genetics holds a huge key to that. And so that's something I've really worked hard to try to get going. And most importantly, along the same lines, is that we need to get more Native students involved in STEM and research and all the things me and Sarah do. So we can not only have a better future, but also be involved in creating that future. And that's why I think it's so important to do things like this, is to inspire students. There is research out there. There's much needed avenues for STEM. So that's kind of why I think we're both here too.
Yeah, and I'd like to kind of just follow up on that with, I think it's really important. So as Skye is an instructor, I've actually also gone back into the classrooms. We have a program called the Biomedical Research After School Scholar Program. And so we go back into the middle school and we put on workshops for students and teach them about genetics and genomics and infectious diseases. And it's a lot of fun, and to hopefully really inspire the younger generation. Also, I think it's really important to engage with tribal communities. We do give a lot of tours at the facility, at the lab. This is actually some Blackfeet students that came down, and they got to put on their lab jackets and gloves and really get a feel for what it's like to be a scientist behind the scenes. And also, I think really important for the younger generation, for folks in college, really look at doing a summer and post-bac internship programs. It changed my life. As I mentioned, I had aspirations of becoming a medical doctor, and that didn't work out. But due to a summer internship at Los Alamos National Labs, that's when I discovered my passion for research. And it was kind of a changing a step for me, and something I'm really thankful about, because I've gotten to do a lot of really cool things in my life. So I think we can kind of depart with this great picture that Skye provided.
Yeah, I actually took that on a trip a couple years ago, but that's Chief Mountain. That's a spiritual place for us as Blackfeet people. So while we answer questions, we all get to stare at that because it's so beautiful.
Yeah, so thanks everyone for your attention. And Skye, it's been great chatting with you today. And Shane, good seeing you. And so be happy to answer questions.
That was very nice. I think all of us learned a lot. I know I sure did. Just that in that short time, you really gave us a lot of information. Sarah, some of those slides that you put up, I could probably, look at them for hours. All that data on there. And so I think it's really exciting for the kids to be able to hear from both of you together at once. And I don't see, we do have a couple questions here, and I was going to say I have a couple questions. Okay, one of them is, Sarah, someone would like to get your email to touch base. And so we can talk about that later, I guess. One of the questions I had, Sarah, and you mentioned it right towards the end of your presentation, was, you've really done a lot of fun and cool things in your life, and a lot of them have kind of come along with the career path that you've gone on. And I was just curious if you could share maybe just one or two things from your personal life that have just been really, pretty cool and important to you? And then I think I'll ask Skye the same question.
From my personal life in terms of where my career's gone.
Yeah, just like
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, actually one cool thing, well, obviously the Anzick story is the biggest, and that's very near and dear to my heart. But I will say that I think one thing that's been very important for me is that I actually feel like it was good for me to leave the state for a while. So I mentioned I went to New Mexico, and that's where I worked on a master's degree and got research experience. And then I moved to Washington, D.C., and that was really out of my comfort zone. New Mexico was nice because it was small and small town, and I really enjoyed it. But then moving into the city life was a very, very big, scary change from me, this Montana native. But what's super cool about it is that I managed to get back home. So my skill sets that I developed in the Washington, D.C. area were the same skill sets, even though my training is in cancer biology and cancer genetics. Really, the tools that we use are pretty much the same depending on what you're going to study. And so I could use that tool set that I had learned for my cancer genomics and transfer that over to Rocky Mountain Labs and get back home. And so because now I have a child and I wanted to raise him in Montana rather than the city. And so I think it's the long and short story of that is it's really important that in your career, you take in as much as you can and develop different skill sets, because I think that opens up a lot more doors for you. And I'm very thankful that I'm able to be back home and continue my research.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Wow. So it's kind of taken you around the nation.
Yeah.
And yep,
Full
and allows you
circle.
to see so much. Yep, and experience a lot of things in life. What about you, Skye?
Okay, I kind of forgot the question, Shane, so you.
Sorry, I don't have time to repeat. I'm just gonna. No, I was just saying, what kind of experiences have you had in your life, that have gone with your career path, that have really been cool experiences for you, that have, helped you learn about yourself and maybe helped you to understand, that the path that you're on was a good one that you'd chosen?
Yeah, I feel like my whole life has kind of been this weird coincidences of stuff that I didn't even know was going to happen. So just like I had mentioned, the McNair Research Project or program, which is a very something that I also think that students should look into. It was monumental for me to, what really wasn't. I mean, genetics was such a burgeoning field then, and I ended up meeting a lady that was working at U of M that was studying genetics. So that's how I started this study and how I got into the diabetes stuff. And, that was eventually supposed to be my my graduate project. So, but I ended up coming home. And the reason for that is I had an opportunity to travel and take a job there where I went all over the US and Canada. And I hadn't really had opportunities like that growing up, on the reservation. And I'm thankful for that experience because I think that's been the biggest part of my life is experiencing different cultures.
Whoops. You guys hear her?
I think we lost her.
Yeah, I
Super
think maybe
fascinating
her
people
internet.
like all
Oh, let me blinking in here 1
and
second.
seeing the amazing work they do. So all of this stuff, like I said, like Sarah said, take advantage of every opportunity, even if it is hard to leave. I know it's been hard for me to leave, but it's been the best thing for me to experience all the amazing places and meeting amazing people. And sorry, my internet's crazy. It's blowing like 100 miles an hour here. So I'm glad I got through the presentation.
Well,
If
thank
you've
you
never
so
been to the
much.
Blackfeet Reservation, just make sure it's going to blow 100 miles an hour.
So we were up there last October with ESCA, and we had a meeting at the Blackfeet College, and the wind was blowing so hard that they couldn't keep the door shut, remember? Like,
Yeah, that's at the beautiful math and science building, but it's not prepared for the winds either. And some of the
Esco was like,
doors don't
wow.
close. Yeah, it was hard for Eska to stand up. That's how bad it was. And I told him, when the wind don't blow, like we all stand sideways because we're so used to leaning into it. So yeah, it's a crazy day, but I'm glad we got through it. And, I hope to inspire other kids. There's a whole wide world of
Yes.
research and great people, and that was my whole point of doing this.
We'd like to do one last call for questions. If anyone has a question, just go ahead and type it into the Q&A at the bottom of the screen, and we'll give it a minute or two and get close to finishing up here.
That
Sarah,
was a wonderful presentation.
The email that person wants, I know them. It's someone from back home here. I think that did the middle school. So I can help you with that. The one question we had.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, feel free to share it. The iCloud account.
Sorry, Shane, I cut you off.
No, I was going to say it was a wonderful presentation, and just to kind of add an addendum there, our work continues. Like you said, we're still hoping to get some more genetic studies going that would include, contemporary populations here in Montana and elsewhere. And I know Skye and I have worked together and have folks in Browning that are on the team. And here's a great question from Greg Bohun. Is there anything the kids at Heart Butte can do to help with the continuing work?
So let me talk about this. I tried to reach out to some Heart Butte people, but I don't really know, besides college level, who instructors are. So I welcome anyone to contact me about, guest presentations, coming into the classroom, anything like that. I know we're all online now up here, and we're in stay-at-home orders, but I can do online stuff like this. But I definitely, the main focus is trying to inspire kids and educate them on what we do and the possibilities for the future. So anyone like that, I will make sure I figure out how to get a hold of you. And
I asked him to email me because I have some other opportunities for young high school students to connect with students elsewhere throughout the United States. And one thing I really believe in, and as you and Sarah both do as well, is to take advantage of every opportunity. And whether or not you think it's a perfect fit for you when you're young, I think just seize it, and it's always a learning opportunity and something that can grow your skill set and your perspective. So I don't see any more questions coming in, but again, just a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. Everyone was very impressed. I know I sure was.
Thank you.
Great presentation. Shall we turn it back over to Karen?
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to also add that I do have access to people's emails, so I'd be happy to connect people afterward, people who are trying to get each other's emails, etc. So I'll send some follow-up emails. So thank you, Skye Gilham and Dr. Anzick. Great presentation. Next Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Please join us for From Siberia to the Americas and Beyond, Becoming an Evolutionary Geneticist with Eska Willerslev. And again, each of these live presentations are uploaded to the Yellowstone Gateway Museum's YouTube channel following the event. So hope to see you next week, and thank you, everyone. Good night.
thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
So long, everybody. Enjoy the election evening.
Yeah.
Don't get too stressed out.
Okay.
Bye.